Okay, last look by Seamus Heaney. Now in this poem, the speaker, who we take to be Seamus Heaney, but the speaker has gone out for the day to the wild roads of Donegal, and there they have come upon a figure standing in a field. Now, you might think, what's so strange about that? Well, when you think about people that you see out and about on the country roads of Northern Ireland or Ulster, they're doing something, aren't they? They're occupied by an employment in some way. They're herding sheep, or they're looking at their crops. They're occupied. And what we have here is a poem whereby the speaker is completely and utterly staggered by the fact that the man that they come across in the field is occupied solely by his own thoughts, that he's completely and utterly oblivious to anything that goes round him. And what that does is it inspires the speaker. This figure becomes a muse, a figure of inspiration. And that inspiration is based upon the speaker trying to create an imaginative landscape, an internal landscape into which this figure has retreated. So the speaker creates this landscape of reminiscence. Now, it's purely fictional, because there's no way the speaker can understand what is going on in the mind of the figure in the field. But the speaker is so entranced by this figure that he creates this landscape of reminiscence. And the landscape of reminiscence is based on Heaney's own experience of what life had been like before he was born, and how life was changing in his early years and his childhood and teenage years. So what we have here is Heaney exploring the life that could have happened for this man, because the man becomes a muse, he becomes a figure of inspiration. Okay, so let's get to the poem. Okay, now one of the things that we have to remember in this poem is that it plays with an allusion, a reference back to Celtic myth, and that's the Celtic myth of Niamh and Oisin. Now, Heaney, as a young boy born in 1939, his primary school education and even his grammar school education at St Columb's, he would have been aware of Celtic myths. Remember that he was a man who had been taught Irish in primary school and secondary school, and Celtic myths would have been well known within his own home and also within school. So the Niamh and Oisin Celtic myth is very simple. Oisin is one of the Fianna, one of the warriors in Ireland, and he comes across one day the most beautiful woman who rides across the beach to him on a beautiful white horse, and this is Niamh. And Niamh is from the land of Tír na nÓg, and at Tír na nÓg, where you never grow old, the land where you never grow old. And she asks Oisin to come back to Tír na nÓg with her, where they will be happy and they'll live together and they'll be married, but he can never come back to Ireland again. So Oisin goes with Niamh and is happy there and marries her, but after what seems like a few years for Oisin, he wants to have a last look at Ireland. He wants to go back. And Niamh says that he can, as long as he stays on the white horse and never puts foot on Irish soil, his foot on Irish soil. So he says that he'll do that, and he goes back to Ireland, but Ireland has changed. He's been away for hundreds of years, and Ireland has changed, and the Fianna are dead. And he tries to help some people lift a boulder, and leans over on the horse's saddle to help lift a boulder, but the saddle breaks and he falls, and when he touches the ground of Ireland, he's transformed into a very, very, very old man. There you have him there, and he looks back to the water, looks back to the ocean, to where Tír na nÓg is, and he can never go back to Niamh, and he's left alone in Ireland and dies soon after. So all that idea about the last look at Ireland, looking out for Niamh to return, that idea of looking and waiting for something, or needing to see something, needing to see this loved one or this beloved place, those are allusions that we can find within the poem. Righty-ho, so let's look at the first stanza then. We came upon him stilled and oblivious, gazing into a field of blossoming potatoes. Now, first of all, let's look at this phrase, we came upon him. It's important for two reasons. One, you've got that pronoun we, because immediately you have the sense that the speaker is part of something. He's part of a group. He has some sense of belonging. There's some sense of a collective there. The speaker and whoever else may be in the car with him. And that is in contrast to the subject, the man in the field, because he is alone. He is isolated. In this poem, tries to give some sort of imaginative life to the speaker that will in some way challenge his isolation. But he is isolated. He's stilled. He's oblivious. He is, even though he is inhabiting the same space, he's not where the speaker is. He's not part of that world. And in order to highlight that, you've got that verb choice, stilled, immediately after we came upon him. Now, we came upon makes it seem as if they're the ones who are moving and they have spotted something. They've spotted some sort of geographical feature. And the geographical feature is the man. He's not moving. Now, if you think about that, if you're travelling anywhere in the countryside and you see people out on country roads, they're walking along the roads, they've got their dogs, they're in the field, they're doing something with the crops, they're working on the tractor. They're not just standing oblivious like a statue in the middle of a field. And yet he is. And that's what captures the imagination of the speaker. The idea that he is so passive, nice word, that he's so passive. The speaker is active, he's part of a collective, and that this subject is passive and isolated. He's oblivious to the world around him, gazing into a field of blossoming potatoes. And then you've got these nice word choices here. Look, you've got blossoming potatoes, you've got flecked with grass seed, you've got flourished. So you've got these verbs, and they're all to do with action, and they're all to do with life, and they're all to do with vitality. And they're all separate from him. So it's as if the world is going on, life is growing and renewing itself, it's blossoming, there's potential there, the weeds are flourishing, there's vitality there, there's life there, but the subject's not part of that again. Because if you look at the subject, his trouser bottom's wet. He's obviously been standing still for so long that his trouser bottoms have become wet. You know, the water has been absorbed into the material, and they're flecked with grass seed. And that gives you a nice little bit of irony, because the grass seed on the wet trouser bottoms have potential for growth. But this man isn't growing. This man is stilled. This man is impassive. He's not growing. But you've got also that idea of that he's been there for so long, it's almost as if he's been subsumed or taken into or being possessed by the natural world. You know, that the grass seed is growing on him like a statue that the moss slowly creeps over and claims as its own. This man is standing in the field and the grass seed has the potential to grow on him, and yet he's not moving. It seems as if he is isolated from the world and the vitality of that world that surrounds him. You also have then the idea of the modern and the natural, and you've got that here with the crown butt head weeds that flourished in the verb choice flailed against our car. This idea that the natural world sees modern world as an intrusion, an unwelcome intrusion. So the modernity that represented by the car is something that is not welcome here. It doesn't fit in. And you have that idea that the natural world flailed. To flail means, you know, to whip or hit, and it's the natural world's whipping against the car. But he seemed not to hear in his long watchfulness. Now there's your first allusion perhaps to that myth of Niamh and Oisin, that long watchfulness, and the romance of that phrase, the long watchfulness, the waiting, the anticipation, that he's expecting something, but what we just do not know, by the cliff top fuchsias. And again, this idea of life and beauty, and yet he is separate from that. He is not part of it. So what you have here is the main reason why the speaker is so absorbed by this image, that this passive, immovable, and yet completely stilled, completely self-absorbed in a good way, the fact that he's lost in his own thoughts and imagination, that is something that really piques the curiosity of the speaker. Okay, let's move on. And then he paid no heed that day. no more than if he were sheep's wool and barbed wire, or an old lock of hay combed from the passing road by a bush in the roadside. Now, you've got this lovely extended metaphor which relates to the idea of the passive nature of this man. He paid no heed that day. He didn't listen. And again, pay no heed is one of those colloquial phrases. Phrases that put this in the Ulster landscape, that give us a sense of where we are. He paid no heed that day, no more than if he were sheep's wool on a barbed wire. Now look at that idea of sheep's wool on a barbed wire. You've got a lot going on there. Let's think about that metaphor. Now he, sheep's wool, soft, vulnerable, displaced, on barbed wire. And then barbed wire, it has that contrast to the softness of the sheep's wool, doesn't it? It's harsh. That idea that where he is doesn't fit in with where he wants to be in his mind, doesn't fit in with where he is actually now in this present day. That there's this softness, this vulnerability to him, this sense of being displaced or lost in a world of barbed wire, in a world that perhaps is harsh, in a world that is one that he doesn't quite fit into. Or an old lock of hay combed from a passing load by a bush in the roadside. And again, there, think about an old lock of hay. Again, it gives you that idea. There's a softness to it. There's a vulnerability to it. Combed from a passing load. Again, this idea that he's not where he should be, that he's displaced, that he's separate from where he should be, that he's combed from a passing load by a bush in the roadside. And what you have with that lovely image there, with that idea, you've got ideas of entrapment. You know, that the wool is trapped on the barbed wire, or that the lock of hay is trapped to the bush. You have that idea that entrapment is there. And that gives a sense of, I suppose, pathos. You know, we feel sorry for this man because he's not really where he should be. And again, you have that idea. Think of the tone there. Think of there's my telephone ringing. I'm going to have to go answer it. Hold on. Sorry about that. Right. So where were we? We're talking about the pathos of this. So this idea of him being trapped, being passive, being trapped. So you've got dual purpose of the metaphor there. But also too, folks, look at, or listen rather, to the very long vowel sounds here. Paid no heed that day, no more than if he were sheep's wool and a barbed wire, or an old lock of hay combed from a load by a bush on the roadside. So you've got, don't know what's happening there. So you've got those long vowel sounds, and again, the tone there is, let's see, can I write, I'll maybe get rid of something here. No, can't do that. Okay. So you've got this, you've got this melancholic tone there with the long vowel sounds, adding to this idea of the pathos of this image, of this man as weak, this man is vulnerable, this man is trapped. And also too, folks, load and roadside, you have that nice wee bit of internal rhyme, which is aiding that melancholic tone. Okay, now this stanza is completely different. You've got a real change, because what you have now is you have the imagination of the speaker creating a life for this old man. He was back in his 20s, travelling Donegal in the grocery cart of Gallagher and Son, merchant, publican, retail and import. Flour bags, no bags, buckets of water for the horse in every whitewashed yard. Drama between the hedges if he met a model Ford. Now in terms of AO4, what we have here is Heaney looking back to his own experiences. Remember, he's born in 1939, so the idea of a travelling grocery cart, that was probably on the wane by the time he was about 10. So, you know, travelling grocery carts would have been the stuff of his parents' generation, that he probably would have heard of from them. And there may have been one or two of them left in Ulster in the late 1940s and the early 1950s, there would have definitely been travelling grocery vans by then. But the idea of it being a cart pulled by a horse was probably something that was more to do with his parents' generation. But what he's trying to do here is he's trying to bring life to the old man, and to do that he's using his own experiences as a child and those experiences that he would have heard of too. So he was back in his 20s, travelling Donegal in the grocery cart of Gallagher and Son, merchant, publican, retail and import. Now if you look there, folks, look at the name of the company that he works for, Gallagher and Son. Now first of all, you have that idea, there's inclusion, something that this poor man hasn't had up until this point. Now, I'm not saying that he's Gallagher's son or anything like that. We don't know. But the first thing that we do know is that that's the first time that we've had inclusion for this old man throughout the poem. The inclusion was for the speaker. We were in the car, and it was always he alone. But there's a sense that in his past he belonged. Past equals belonging. And that's what you get in this verse. And also past equals importance. Think about how important Gallagher and Son, merchant, publican, retail and import sounds. It gives him some sense of importance. It gives him some sense of dignity. It gives some sense of respect. That we don't have in this new world, in this world where he's the old man in the field. And also then you have an idea of there's vitality here. Now we had vitality in the first verse with all those verbs about blossoming and flourishing, but he wasn't part of them. The subject wasn't part of them. But here there's vitality. Vitality because of the use of rhythm. The way the syllables have been used create this vital rhythm, this pace, this life, this interest. Travelling Donegal in the grocery cart of Gallagher and Son, merchant, publican, retail and import. Flour bags, nosebags, buckets of water for the horse in every whitewashed yard. And let's go back to that word dignity there. Look, in every whitewashed yard. You have this idea of a domestic world where he stops off at different farmyards and everything is whitewashed, it's clean, it's domestic, it's homely, and yet it's respected, it's respectful. He is respected. There's a bucket of water for the horse in every whitewashed yard, i.e. the people that he goes to visit, they await him. They look forward to seeing him. They have the water there for the horse. So there's an idea that he is someone with gravitas. He's someone with some status. Someone who's expected and who's treated in a way that is hospitable and in a way that shows that he's regarded. Flour bags, nosebags, buckets of water for the horse in every whitewashed yard. Also here, folks, you have the idea of drama between the hedges if he met a model Ford. Again, that theme that we have had in the first verse and the second about the modern and the traditional, the modern and the natural. So the model Ford there represents the model word. The model Ford was the first mass-produced car. And here, that model Ford, and if you remember, folks, if you were there to see the wonderful drama of Isaac and Lily pretending to be the horse and the grocery man, and Tom was the car. But what you have there is you've got the comedy of that drama between the hedges if he met a whitewashed Ford. If he met a model Ford. The idea that comedy and comedy and life in this verse that you haven't had in such a way previously. And what you have there too is the sense that this is the imaginative creation of the speaker. He gives this man importance. He gives this man life. He gives him a backstory that is fitting, that he deserves. And then we get to the final stanza. And what you have here is, if Neve had ridden up to make the wide strands sweet with inviting Irish, weaving among hoofbeats and hoof marks on the wet dazzling blaze, I think not even she could have drawn him out from the covert of his gaze. Now, in the previous stanza, you'd had quite a lot of sort of prosaic, unimaginative language to do with the domestic world, language to do with the everyday. And here you have the opposite of that prosaic language. You have the hyperbole of language that is there to create an image of beauty, of mythical beauty. And again, you've got that allusion back to the world of myth and to the world of Niamh and Oisin. So the hyperbole of this language, the idea that it is so elaborate, that it sounds so mellifluous, it sounds so sweet and honeyed, is there to stand in contrast to what we've just had, the prosaic ordinariness, the domestic comedy of the whitewash yard. And here you have the opposite of that. You have this mythical beauty, but neither of those things, and this in particular, the idea of the beauty of Niamh, not even that could take him out of his revelry. Not even that could remove him from the thoughts that occupy him so. So if Niamh had ridden up to made the wide strands sweet with inviting Irish. Now look at that lovely sibilance there. The wide strand is a beach, the wide strand sweet with inviting Irish. So you have that beautiful soft sibilance there, and inviting Irish, that idea of being part of something that have been wanted, being desired, weaving among the hoofbeats and hoof marks on the wet dazzle and blaze. And I love, look at that metaphor, the dazzle and blaze for the beach. You know, the beach with the sunlight glistening on the soft waves. And just think about the beauty of that image and listen to how it sounds, weaving among the hoofbeats and the hoof marks on the wet dazzle and blaze. So you've got this lovely soft rhythm of the weaving movements of Niamh, weaving her way across the beach. You've got the beauty of the language, the hoofbeats and the hoof marks on the wet dazzle and blaze, and yet it's in vain. It's all in vain because it does not awaken him from his revelry. It doesn't take him out of where he is. Sorry, it's very hard to write these things here today. Does that work for you? Can you see it there? I think not even she could have drawn him. Now look at that, drawn him out, which suggests some idea of again his vulnerability. To draw somebody out means that they want to be where they are, and to draw them out is something that you have to actively do. From the covert, and here covert means some place of protection. So suddenly we have this idea that his mind is somewhere where it needs to be protected from what is around him. You have this idea that what he's seeking is a place of shelter, a place of sanctuary. As an old man, he's seeking a place of retreat, a retreat away from this modern world and from the intrusions of modernity within it, that he's trying to find somewhere where he can be safe. And again, that links back to that poignant image of him as the sheep's wool. So what you have too is a movement from the initial intrigue as to we came upon him, there he was, and his long watchfulness and the romance of that. And then you had that sense of poignancy with his vulnerability and his sense of displacement. Then you had the life and vitality of the imaginative landscape that the speaker had created for him in his 20s. And then now what you have is you have a return again to that idea of uncertainty, that he's lost in his own mind, that he prefers to be there. And what we also have too is the idea of the circular nature of this poem, that we start off with the old man alone in the field, we journey into his mind only through the speaker's imagination, and we come back to that static, stilled image where the old man is oblivious, because even the beauty of Neve cannot draw him out of that oblivion. He's protecting himself in some way, that his mind has sought a place of retreat and he doesn't want to leave it. So again, you have this idea of the circularity, the cyclical structure of this poem, because he begins oblivious and he ends oblivious, and what happens in between is only the imagination of the poet, of the speaker. And we have a sense that for this poor man, that, you know, he's lost in his past, he's trapped in his past, and perhaps that's a trap that he'll willingly enter into and doesn't want to leave.